Stars Apart, Hearts Entwined, Part 1. Echoes of Promise. Commander Ethan Voss stood before the massive viewport of Station Meridian, watching the stars' wheels slowly past in their eternal dance. The scar running from his left temple to his jaw caught the reflected starlight, a permanent reminder of battles fought in humanity's expansion across the galaxy. 6 years of command had carved lines around his dark eyes that hadn't been there when he was just another young peacekeeping officer with dreams of making the universe a better place. Commander? Lieutenant Torres approached from behind, datapad in hand. The diplomatic vessel from the Cathara homeworld has just dropped, out of hyperspace. They'll be docking in Bay 7 within the hour. Ethan nodded without turning. The Cathara, he hadn't thought about them in years. Not since Xerion Prime. Not since... Sir? Torres pressed gently. Station Commander Briggs requested your presence for the welcoming ceremony. Something about your previous contact with their species. Previous contact. Such a clinical way to describe what had been the most profound 3 months of his young military career. Ethan finally turned from the viewport, his expression carefully neutral. Tell Commander Briggs I'll be there. Dismissed. As Torres's footsteps faded down the corridor, Ethan allowed himself to remember. Xerion Prime 6 years ago. The colony world had been beautiful in its alien way. Purple-leafed forests under twin suns, crystalline rivers that sang in harmonics as they flowed. The Cathara settlement nestled in a valley like something from a fairy tale, all flowing architecture and bioluminescent gardens. He'd been 24 then, part of a joint peacekeeping force mediating a territorial dispute between human colonists and the indigenous Cathara. The locals were humanoid but distinctly alien, tall and graceful with skin that shifted between pale blue and silver depending on their mood, and eyes like captured starlight. Their culture fascinated him. Their technology was organic, grown, rather than built, and their society was matriarchal, led by wise women who could live for centuries. And then there was Kirillin. At 13, she'd been all curiosity and fierce intelligence, the daughter of Chieftain Velandra. While the adults negotiated, she'd shadowed Ethan relentlessly, peptering him with questions about human culture, technology, and the stars beyond her world. Her skin stayed a constant warm silver around him. What he'd later learned indicated trust and affection among her people. Why do humans fight so much? She'd asked one day as they sat by the singing river, her large eyes reflecting the alien sunset. We're still learning how to be better, he'd answered honestly, but we're trying. She'd nodded solemnly, then brightened. When I'm grown, I'll help teach humans and Cathara to understand each other better. We'll explore the stars together. He'd smiled at her enthusiasm. I'm sure you'll do amazing things, little star. But then came the night everything changed. Separatist elements from both species had planned a joint attack on the peace talks, hoping to escalate the conflict. The assault on the Cathara settlement had been swift and brutal. Ethan had fought his way through burning buildings and screaming civilians to reach the chieftain's compound, where Kirillin lay bleeding from a plasma burn across her ribs. He'd carried her to safety, her silver blood staining his uniform, her body frighteningly light in his arms. As the medical teams worked to save her life, she'd gripped his hand with surprising strength. Ethan, she'd whispered, her voice weak, but determined. Promise me something. Anything. Wait for me. Her starlight eyes had been fever bright but absolutely serious. When I'm grown, when I'm old enough, I'll come find you, and I'll be yours if you'll have me. Promise you'll wait. He'd thought it was delirium from the pain medication, the innocent fantasy of a traumatized child seeking comfort. So he'd squeezed her hand gently and whispered, I promise, little star. She'd smiled then, her skin flickering between silver and pale gold, colors he'd never seen her display before. I'll hold you to that, Commander Ethan Voss. The peace accords had been signed a week later. The last time he'd seen Kirillin, she'd been standing with her mother, watching his transport lift off. Even at that distance, he could see her skin shining silver bright in the alien sunshine. A soft chime from his comm unit brought Ethan back to the present. Time to face whatever diplomatic niceties awaited in Bay 7. He straightened his uniform, checked that his weapons were properly secured, and headed for the docking bay. The Cathara vessel was a thing of beauty, organic curves that seemed to breathe, its hull shifting between deep purple and midnight blue. As Ethan joined Commander Helena Briggs and the small welcoming committee, the airlock cycled open with a soft sigh. The first figure to emerge was tall and imposing, clearly an elder by the silver threads woven through her hair and the authority in her bearing. Behind her came what appeared to be an honor guard, 6 warriors in flowing, form-fitting armor that seemed to be made of the same material as their ship. And then she stepped into the light. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. 6 years had transformed the curious child into a breathtaking woman. Kiralyn stood nearly as tall as him now, her limbs long and graceful, her curves evident even beneath her diplomatic robes. Her skin held that same warm silver tone he remembered, but now it seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Her eyes, those impossible starlight eyes, found his immediately across the docking bay. She smiled, slow and knowing, and her skin brightened to pale gold. "Commander Voss," she said, her voice carrying easily across the space between them, rich with an accent that made his name sound like music. "I told you I'd come back." The diplomatic reception suddenly felt very far away. The formal diplomatic reception had been a carefully orchestrated dance of protocol and politics, but Ethan's attention had been entirely focused on the woman who had once been a curious child. Kiralyn moved through the crowd with fluid grace, her diplomatic training evident in every gesture, yet her eyes kept finding his across the room. "She's grown into quite the beauty," Commander Helena Briggs murmured beside him, her tone carefully neutral. "The briefings mention she's now the youngest ambassador in Cathara history. Brilliant tactical mind according to their cultural attaché." Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Every time Kiralyn laughed at something another diplomat said, her skin would shift to that warm silver he remembered, and he felt something twist in his chest. The reception finally ended 3 hours later. As the crowd dispersed, Kiralyn approached him directly, ignoring the subtle protest from her honor guard. "Commander Voss," she said formally, then her voice dropped to something more intimate. "Or may I still call you Ethan?" "Of course." He managed, hyper-aware of how close she stood. Her scent was subtly alien, like starflowers and ozone. "You've changed," she laughed, the sound rich and warm. 6 years tend to do that. You've changed too." Her fingers almost touched the scar on his face before she caught herself. The Terran-Vegan conflict, among others. He stepped back slightly, needing distance. "You shouldn't be here alone. Protocol." "Protocol," she interrupted, her skin flickering briefly to a deeper blue. Annoyance, he recalled, can be flexible when old friends reunite. She gestured toward a quieter corridor. "Walk with me?" Against his better judgment, he fell into step beside her. They moved through the station's observation deck, where the stars provided a familiar backdrop to their reunion. "Do you remember what I told you?" she asked suddenly, stopping before a viewport. "On Zirion Prime, when you carried me to safety?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Kiralyn, you were 13. Traumatized. What you said, I meant every word." She turned to face him, fully, her skin now a brilliant gold that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. "I've spent 6 years preparing for this moment, learning about human culture, politics, military structure. I studied your language until I could speak it without an accent, though I kept it because you seemed to like it." Her smile was devastating. "I researched your career, your commendations, your losses. I know about the men you've lost, the battles that scarred you, the loneliness you wear like armor." "Stop." The word came out harsher than he intended. "You don't know me anymore. I'm not the same man who promised to wait for me." Her hand finally touched his face, fingers tracing the scar with infinite gentleness. "You kept that promise, didn't you? No bondmate, no life partner. You waited." He caught her wrist, but didn't pull her hand away. Her skin was warm, softer than human flesh, but with an underlying strength that spoke of her warrior training. It wasn't waiting. It was just living. Badly, she observed, her thumb brushing across his cheekbone. You've been living badly, Ethan. Holding everyone at arm's length. Throwing yourself into missions that should have killed you. I read the reports. You had no right. I had every right. Her skin flared brighter, anger and passion mixing in brilliant patterns across her features. You're mine, just as I'm yours. I claimed you 6 years ago, and you accepted that claim. Among my people, such bonds are sacred. Among your people, he said quietly, finally stepping back. But I'm human, Kira Lynn, and you're an ambassador now. There are rules, protocols, political implications. There are always rules, she said softly, her skin dimming to that familiar silver. But there are also choices. I've made mine. The question is whether you'll make yours. Before he could respond, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. Soft, warm, and tasting of alien starlight. The kiss lasted only seconds, but it left him staggered. Think about it, she whispered against his lips. But don't think too long. I'm not a patient child anymore, Ethan Voss. I'm a woman who knows what she wants. She walked away, leaving him, standing alone among the stars, his hand unconsciously rising to touch his lips where her warmth still lingered. The next morning brought a crisis that would test every diplomatic protocol on the station. News of Kira Lynn's public declaration, and their kiss, had somehow leaked to both the human and Cathara press. Ethan's comm unit buzzed incessantly, with requests for statements, while emergency diplomatic channels crackled with outraged transmissions from both species' governments. This is a disaster, Commander Briggs said, pacing her office while Ethan stood at attention. The Cathara Council is calling it a breach of diplomatic immunity. Our own foreign ministry is demanding explanations, and somehow, every news outlet in 3 sectors is running headlines about forbidden interspecies romance. Ma'am, I don't want to hear it, Voss. Briggs stopped pacing to fix him with a glare. You're to have no contact with Ambassador Kira Lynn outside of official functions. That's an order. Understood. But understanding and compliance, Ethan discovered, were very different things when Kira Lynn was involved. She appeared at his workout facility that evening, having somehow acquired clearance through channels he couldn't fathom. Diplomatic immunity has its privileges, she said with a smile, noting his surprised expression. She wore training attire that left little to the imagination, form-fitting and practical but highlighting every elegant line of her alien physique. I hear human males bond through combat. Perhaps you'd care to spar? I could hurt you, he said, even as his eyes traced the subtle patterns her skin made in the gymnasium's lighting. You could try. Her smile turned predatory. But I'm not the helpless child you remember. She proved that within the first 30 seconds. Her combat style was unlike anything in his training, fluid like water but striking like lightning. She used her superior flexibility and the slight gravitational differences in her bone structure to devastating effect, turning his strength against him repeatedly. Yield? She asked sweetly, having somehow maneuvered him into a submission hold that pressed her body against his back, her breath warm against his ear. Never, he growled, using brute force to break free and spin to face her. They circled each other, both breathing hard now, sweat glistening on their skin. Her patterns had shifted to deep purples and blues, colors he'd never seen before, predatory and seductive. What do those colors mean? He asked, keeping his distance. Desire, she said simply. Hunting. The need to claim what's mine. This time, when they clashed, it was less about technique and more about raw need. They grappled, neither truly trying to win, both lost in the intoxicating mixture of combat and attraction. When they finally broke apart, they were both gasping, staring at each other across 3 feet of charged air. Ethan, she whispered, her skin now a brilliant gold shot through with silver threads. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands cupping her face as he kissed her properly this time. She melted against him, her alien strength becoming fluid grace in his arms. Her skin was warm velvet under his palms, and she tasted like starlight and promises. "We can't," he murmured against her lips, even as his hands traced the graceful line of her neck. "We already are," she breathed back, her fingers tangling in his hair. The kiss deepened, became something desperate and hungry. 6 years of separation, of unfulfilled promises and unspoken longing, poured between them. Her skin brightened until she seemed to glow in his arms, patterns of light playing across her features like living art. They broke apart only when the need for air became overwhelming. Foreheads pressed together, sharing breath in the aftermath. "The complications," he started, "will work themselves out," she finished firmly. "Love finds a way, Ethan. It always has, across every species, every culture, every star system. What we have is stronger than politics." But even as he held her, breathing in her alien scent and marveling at the way her skin painted light across the darkened gymnasium, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that love alone might not be enough to overcome the forces arraying against them. The backlash came swift and merciless. Within 48 hours, both governments had issued formal protests. The Terran Foreign Ministry recalled Ethan to Earth for debriefing, while the Cathara Council demanded Kira Lynn's immediate return to negotiate what they termed a more suitable political alliance. "It's temporary," Commander Briggs assured him as they waited for his transport. 6 months, maybe less. Let the political heat die down. Give both sides time to save face. Ethan nodded mechanically, but his eyes were on the docking bay where Kira Lynn stood with her honor guard. She'd maintained perfect diplomatic composure throughout the morning's farewells, but her skin had remained a dull silver, the color of sorrow and loss. Their eyes met across the space, and for a moment, protocol fell away. She pressed her hand to her heart, then extended it toward him. A Cathara gesture of eternal devotion. He mimicked the movement, feeling something tear inside his chest as her face crumpled briefly before she regained control. The next 6 weeks were the longest of Ethan's life. Earth felt small and gray after the vastness of space, and the debriefings were thinly veiled interrogations about his compromise of diplomatic protocol. He answered their questions with military precision, while his heart remained light years away. News from the Cathara homeworld was sparse but troubling. Kira Lynn had been recalled to face the Council of Matriarchs, where pressure was mounting for her to accept a political marriage to strengthen their alliance with the Zelvan Empire. The proposed match would secure critical trade routes and military support, everything her people needed for their continued independence. Everything except her happiness. The crisis that brought them back together came from an unexpected quarter. Pirates, emboldened by the apparent rift between human and Cathara forces, launched a coordinated attack on 3 border worlds simultaneously. The assault was too large for either species to handle alone, requiring immediate cooperation between their fleets. Ethan found himself aboard the flagship Meridian, hastily promoted to tactical coordinator for the joint operation. When the Cathara battle group arrived, his heart stopped. Kira Lynn stood on the bridge of their lead vessel, no longer wearing diplomatic robes but the flowing battle armor of a war chief. "She's been given field command," Admiral Cortez explained quietly. "Youngest war chief in their history. Seems your girlfriend has been busy." The battle was brutal but brief. Human precision and firepower combined with Cathara mobility and biotechnology to devastating effect. Ethan and Kira Lynn commanded their respective forces with seamless coordination, as if they shared a single mind across the vacuum of space. But victory came at a cost. Kira Lynn's flagship took heavy damage protecting a human transport full of civilians. The last transmission Ethan received was her voice, calm and clear over the comm. "Tell Ethan. Tell him I kept my promise." Then her ship disappeared in a bloom of fire and debris. Ethan's roar of denial echoed across the human bridge. He was in an escape pod burning through space toward the wreckage before anyone could stop him. He found her ship's command pod drifting among the debris, its biohull breached but still maintaining life support. Kira Lynn lay unconscious in the wreckage, silver blood seeping from multiple wounds, her skin flickering weakly between silver and gray, the colors of dying. He pulled her from the twisted metal, his hands shaking as he pressed emergency medical patches to her injuries. "Don't you dare," he whispered fiercely, gathering her into his arms. "Don't you dare leave me again." Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on his face with effort. "Ethan? I'm here. I'm here, little star. Just hold on." Her hand found his face, fingers tracing his scar one more time. "I love you," she whispered. "Since I was 13, since the day you saved me. I've loved you through every star, every dream, every breath. I love you too," he said, the admission torn from his soul. "I've loved you for 6 years and been too afraid to admit it. Too afraid of what it would mean." Her skin brightened slightly, silver threads weaving through the gray. "Then fight for us. Don't let them tear us apart again." He pressed his lips to hers, gentle and desperate, pouring every emotion he'd suppressed into that single connection. "Never again," he swore against her mouth. "Never again, I promise." The rescue ships found them there, wrapped in each other's arms among the stellar debris, two souls finally admitting what their hearts had known all along. Kira Lynn's recovery took 3 weeks in the medical bay of Station Meridian. During that time, the political landscape shifted dramatically. The joint victory against the pirates had captured public imagination across both species, and suddenly, their romance was being hailed as a symbol of cooperation rather than a diplomatic scandal. But private pressure remained intense. The Cathara Council still insisted on the political marriage, while human officials worried about the precedent of interspecies unions at the command level. Ethan made his decision on the morning Kira Lynn was scheduled for release. He strode into Admiral Cortez's office in full dress uniform, his resignation letter in hand. "You can't be serious," Cortez said, scanning the document. "You're throwing away a brilliant career." "I'm choosing love over duty for the first time in my life," Ethan replied simply. "If that means leaving the service, so be it." "And if she chooses duty over love? Her people need that alliance." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then I'll respect her decision and find a way to live with it." But he wouldn't have to. Kira Lynn appeared in the doorway, her skin bright gold with determination. She moved with only a slight stiffness from her injuries, her recovery aided by Cathara biotechnology. "I've been looking for you," she said, then noticed the resignation letter. Her skin shifted to concerned silver. "What's this?" "My choice," he said simply. "If I'm a civilian, the political complications become manageable. You can make the alliance your people need, and I'll—" She silenced him with a kiss, fierce and claiming, her skin blazing so bright it cast shadows in the Admiral's office. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "You wonderful, stubborn man," she whispered. "Do you really think I'd choose politics over the man who's held my heart for 6 years? But your people will adapt." Her voice carried the authority of someone born to command. "I've spent 3 weeks negotiating via subspace with the Council. The Zelvan Empire has agreed to the alliance based on our military cooperation alone, and the Council has agreed to recognize our bond as politically advantageous, a living symbol of human Cathara unity." Admiral Cortez cleared his throat. "Does this mean you're not resigning, Commander?" Ethan looked at Kira Lynn, saw the future shining in her starlight eyes. "That depends. Are you prepared to have the first official interspecies couple in Fleet Command?" "I think," Cortez said with a grin, "that we can manage the politics." The wedding took place 3 months later, in the observation deck of Station Meridian, with the galaxy's stars as witness. Kira Lynn wore traditional Cathara marriage robes that seemed woven from captured starlight, while Ethan wore his dress uniform with newly minted captain's insignia. The ceremony blended both cultures, human vows spoken under alien stars, Cathara, bonding rituals adapted for human physiology. When they exchanged rings, Kira Lynn's skin blazed gold and silver, patterns of joy painting themselves across her features. "With this ring," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd of 2 species, "I claim you as my own, across every star, every world, every lifetime. And with this, Kirillin replied, placing a bioluminescent Cathara bond mark on his wrist. I bind my life to yours, my heart to yours, my soul to yours until the stars burn cold. Their kiss sealed not just their union, but a new chapter in interspecies relations. When they broke apart, the mixed crowd erupted in cheers that echoed through the station's corridors. 1 year later, Captain Ethan Voss and War Chief Kirillin. Voss commanded the joint patrol ship Harmony, the first vessel crewed equally by humans and Cathara. Their marriage had indeed become a symbol of cooperation, inspiring a new generation of interspecies partnerships across the galaxy. They stood together on their bridge, watching a binary star system paint the nebula around them in shades of gold and silver, colors that matched the patterns constantly playing across Kirillin's skin whenever she looked at her husband. Do you ever regret it? Ethan asked quietly, his arm around her waist. Giving up a traditional life for this? Kirillin smiled, pressing closer to his side. I made my choice at 13, she said simply. Everything since then has just been keeping that promise. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining. Besides, who wants traditional when you can have extraordinary? He kissed her temple, breathing in her familiar scent of starflowers and ozone. I love you, little star. And I love you, my brave captain, she murmured back, her skin shifting to that warm silver that meant home, meant safety, meant forever, across every star, every world, every lifetime. The Harmony sailed on through the cosmic night, carrying its mixed crew toward new adventures, new worlds, new possibilities. And in the captain's quarters that night, two souls who had found each other across species and stars celebrated their love with passion that burned as bright as the binary suns outside their viewport. Skin against skin, heart against heart, two halves of a whole that had been written in the stars long before a curious 13-year-old girl first looked up at a young human officer and decided he was worth waiting for. Their love had conquered distance, politics, and prejudice. It had survived war, separation, and duty. Now it would endure forever, a beacon of hope among the stars, proof that love truly could find a way across any barrier the universe might raise. In the end, some promises were meant to be kept, especially those made by starlight, sealed with a kiss and written across the infinite canvas of space itself.